Hello, and welcome to the Goddess Project podcast side series, Goddess Talks. I'm so very excited to share this side series with you, which are just going to be a few episodes that are embedded through the other episodes, the regular episodes of the Goddess Project. And the Goddess Talks will be interviews with other scholars, with other people that are in the field of goddess worship, of the divine feminine, people that I really want to talk to about the goddess. So this series is a little bit selfish, and in the sense that it is something that I enjoy doing and that I love doing. And so I'm very, very excited to share it with you guys. And I'm very excited to have these conversations and, widen the circle and of scholars and widen the knowledge that can be shared. Often a lot of scholars that are doing really fantastic work are not on social media or haven't really developed like a YouTube site or other site. And then sometimes they have fantastic social media. And so I really would like to share with everyone some of the people that inspire me and some of the writers that I find intriguing, and also that I find their research super intriguing. So welcome to the Goddess Talks series. I hope that you enjoyed the series as much as I enjoy recording it. This week, I had the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Glenys Livingstone, such an intriguing academic and scholar and a wonderful human being that wrote a fantastic book that I highly recommend. And that was part of our Goddess Reads book club for a little while. And I also use it in many of my courses. So Dr. Glenys Livingstone is a PhD who has been on the goddess path since 1979. She is the author of PaGaian Cosmology, Reinventing Earth-Based Goddess Religion, which fuses the indigenous traditions of old Europe with scientific theory, feminism, and a poetic relationship with place. She was born and lives in the country of Australia, where she has facilitated seasonal ceremonies for decades, taught classes, and mentored apprentices. She is the author of the children's book, My Name is Medusa, which is fantastic, and co-editor of the anthology, Revisioning Medusa, From Monster to Divine Wisdom, also a fantastic read. Glenys teaches a year-long course called Celebrating Cosmogenesis in the Wheel of the Year for both hemispheres. Her website is pagayan.org. I have all the links below. To her books, to her website, and even to her Facebook group that she leads on Facebook. So welcome to Dr. Glenys Livingstone. I hope you'll enjoy this interview. We had a blast filming and talking, so I hope that you'll enjoy this interview. Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome, Glenys. It is so nice to meet you. Not for the first time, because we've been talking on Facebook a little bit back and forth, which is really, really great, which was actually what gave me the idea that we should talk about these things, more together other than on Facebook. And so I have a copy of your book right here.
Pagayan.
Okay, yeah. I love that. I have actually,
Gaia.
Yes. I've actually used it. I have a couple of students that I mentor, and I've recommended it to them. And it has been a really great success. Just so you know, it had they were like, I really loved that book. It was dense and informative in a way, like it had meat.
Right.
And I thought, yeah, it looked like Glenys put in a lot of work into this text. Yeah.
So your PhD, you see?
Yeah.
In the old days when you still had to do a hard copy of your PhD.
Wow.
It's a doorstop.
Wow. So I was going to ask you, so this is a perfect segue. I was going to ask you about your PhD. What was it and what inspired it, kind of thing? And how long did it take you?
Well, for a start, it only took me 3 years. Well, to write the thing only took 3 years, because that's the time I had a scholarship, and I knew I couldn't do it without the scholarship. But it was based on work that had been, I had been celebrating the seasonal ceremonies. Well, I began in about 1988, and then it got really formal in about 1998. And that was around about the same time I applied to do the PhD. because I realized that a lot of the people who were coming to, I was giving conference papers on celebrating the seasons.
Amazing.
And at, you know, different conferences. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the people who came were university people who were being paid big bucks, and I was living on the sniff of an oily rag. And but they were coming to listen to me, and
Yeah.
they liked what I had to say. So I thought, oh, I better go down to the local university, because I did have a master's in theology and philosophy.
Nice.
And the University of Western Sydney social ecology. And they I applied at there to do the PhD.
Uh-huh.
And it was really, for me, I knew I wanted to do a study of the female metaphor of the goddess in her three aspects. You know, I mean, I had been in theology, and, you know, there's all these tomes about the Trinity, and they've written here. And I think, well, I'm going to do a study of the female Trinity, you know,
Love it.
female
Yes,
metaphor.
that's right.
And so I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I was also very passionate about Brian Swim's work, you know, and Thomas Berry, the universe story.
Hmm.
I thought, well, and they had three qualities of cosmogenesis. And I thought, well, somehow or other, it's all got to come together. But, you know, the radical thing for me was when I told the university professor what I wanted to study. He said, what do you want? What do you want to write? I said, well, I'm very scared, you know, that he would
Right.
think it was rubbish.
Right.
Study of the three aspects of the goddess. Oh yes, he says, okay. And he didn't blink an eye. He just like, oh yes, okay. Took me seriously.
Wow.
Whoa. So that, for me, it was like he took my hand and helped me over a chasm, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And even one of my friends, male friends, said to me, when I got the scholarship, they're giving you a scholarship for that. That's what it was at. And I was remembering recently that, you know, I had a master's in theology and philosophy, and I was trying to sort of see if I could teach at the local seminary or something like that.
Uh-huh.
But after a while, I just knew it wouldn't work because I wouldn't compromise. You see, I couldn't really fit in. You know, what I wanted to teach was about her, you know, the great mother.
Yes.
And it really just didn't. So, and I always used to say back in those days that a degree in theology was an eminently useless degree for a woman to have.
That's firm but true. I think firm but true, you know.
But then there was a point at which I stopped saying that, when I started to realize, I mean, it is the ground, you know, upon which I was able to launch into the PhD.
True. Also true. Yes. Yes.
So it has become useful.
Yes. Yes. It's funny that you say that, because I have a similar, so my PhD was Artemis in Ephesus, and how she sort of transmuted or fused with the Virgin Mary. And for a long time, people would say to me, well, do you want to teach at a Catholic college or a theology college? But I thought the same thing. I thought, you know, I don't think that and with all respect, I love the Virgin Mary, I grew up with her, but I don't think that my views, my academic views, my personal spiritual views align with like Catholicism in that way. And I think I'm going to go to those schools and start teaching about, you know, the divine feminine and the goddess being manipulated into all these, anyways. And they would be like, Carla, there's a door. This is not what we paid for, you know?
Yes.
So I get it in a way that theology doesn't always fit right. You know, it doesn't feel like the right fit.
No. Yeah, it's like, you know, I often used to speak about, you know, like Mary. It was like, you know, what the church did to Mary was like, you know, trying to hold a bubble of air in the bottom of a fish tank.
Yes. Yes.
And really, she needed to rise, you know, where she belonged was in the
I
open.
love it. Yes. Yes. And it's
But
funny the egg too.
They try to sit on her and you know, and say, oh.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. And actually, I love the whole egg imagery too, as well, because exactly. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, see what you think, what your opinion is. I was reading, where do I want to start? I was reading about the virgin goddesses, of course. And you talk a little bit about Artemis. Every time I see Artemis somewhere, I'm like, where do you think she fits in your work? Since, you know, what do you think? Like, how do you think she What do you think of her, actually? I don't know.
Well, Artemis was my first goddess. Now, I don't know why
Hmm.
that was so, but she's definitely appealed to me in the very earliest of days.
Oh.
Um, and maybe it was because it was this virgin quality, the spiritual warrior, as we understand virgin to mean,
That's right.
Parthenos, she
That's right.
who is unto herself, a spiritual warrior.
Yes. I
And
like that term. I like that term. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that's why she appealed, because I certainly needed it.
Mm.
That was a quality I certainly needed. Because there was, as there is often in our lives, a lot of compost,
Mm.
and to find your way out of that, to find my way out of that, I needed that quality, the urge to be, as I call it, and Artemis certainly embodies that, with her arrow and in the Imbolc ceremonies, the early spring rituals that I do, Artemis is a very strong part of that, and her arrow flying true and on center. And we pass an arrow around the circle and
Oh,
hold it to
wow.
our hearts,
Oh, wow.
and so that we can be, invoking Artemis so that we can fly true and on center.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah, the arrow is beautiful. I have a beautiful arrow, and it's I don't know. I actually don't have to shoot it, although it has been shot in its time, I think. Um, And I do have a bow that is not properly strung. So it's always, we put the bow on a red aisle along with Artemisia, the herbs. Artemisia herbs, I have an Artemisia plant.
Oh,
Wherever
wow.
I go, I make sure I plant an Artemisia. And then
Wow.
for the early spring rituals, I cut some and tie it with silver bows and ribbons, and we have it there. And each of us gets an Artemisia, each one gets one. Everyone gets one, and rubs it and tastes it, the bitterness of that herb, because that's the herb that's used to midwife. It's used to ease the pain of birth.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow. That's really beautiful, Glenys. That's wow. And when you say we, are you referring to a circle, a community?
yes. You see, for decades, I guess it was, it started really formally, as I say, in 1998, doing all the seasonal celebrations, the 8 of them on the old European calendar. And so there was always a group, and it started with my moon circle. I had a moon circle back in those days, and we actually used to meet before that in the mid-90s, and we do some of the seasonal celebrations. That's where it really began, and that's where I got a taste for it, and I thought, oh. And that's where I, sensed the power of it. It was like, I sensed the power of doing the seasonal ceremonies. And thought, well, I've got to take this more seriously, And so, yes, there's always been a we, because there's always been willing participants. And it started with my moon circle. But when, then in my place, I used to have to move around because I didn't really have a place. I did have a home where it could happen, but there have always been willing participants. And certainly when I began the PhD, there was a committed group who were part of that, the drummers, the women who were drummers.
Wow.
And we would have pre-ritual meetings and post-ritual meetings. And so they were really helped, we informed each other, as we do in Circle.
Yes.
And then when I took my partner Taffy, we continued doing it at my place, but he really built the goddess ceremonial space.
Oh, wow.
It's called Moon Court, and if you Google it, you find it, and it's on my website, Moon Court. So once they were already happening, as I say, and I had to interview all the willing participants, some of them for the PhD.
Yes. Yes.
But certainly when Moon Court got built in 2008, they continued right through the construction. And I have photos of, the things set up in the middle of construction. We still did it, I mean, the earth doesn't stop turning. You don't say, oh, we won't do it this time.
That's true.
We just did whatever we did in the middle of construction. And, yeah, so there was always, and sometimes they were quite large. I can't believe sometimes, we had 23, which was large for that space. And then sometimes they were very small, but I didn't ever worry about how many people there were.
Okay.
I don't think it really matters.
Yeah, I agree.
And even that's with students as well. If I had one for the year, that's all that mattered. It didn't matter.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful that you've had so much. So for me, I just recently started so this was the first Christmas that I didn't celebrate Christmas.
You did consider Christmas. Right. Okay. Right.
It was the first time that I said, you know what, I'm just going to admit that I'm not celebrating Christmas. It's not for me. I'm moving towards the solstices. I'm moving towards the wheel. But it's really the first year that I'm practicing and reaching out to circles of women. So I feel like I came from it from a different way because I came through school, like through academia. And so it was very difficult to break out of academia into like non-academia.
Right.
Yeah.
When you say you celebrate Christmas this year, do you mean you celebrated winter solstice this year, or you actually did the Christian thing?
No, so I didn't celebrate Christmas. This was the first year I didn't. And so I did the winter solstice. Yeah. Yeah. And last year was the first year that I did all the solstices.
Ah, right.
Yeah, with groups.
Yes.
And it's so powerful.
It is. It is.
So powerful, and as an academic, it was very difficult to participate in a way because I don't know, for a long time, it felt like woo-woo, right? It feels like
yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It feels like woo, but it feels right. So it's a weird thing that you have in your head, right? Because you have that sort of mindset, and then you have the actual feeling of participating.
Yes.
And I think that was the challenge for me. And I love your story that you were already there, and then you got to do the academic part. And you said that you used participants. Is these the participants that you were talking about in your circle?
Yes, some of them who are still with me now. One of them who attends online now, which is a very small thing I do online. But she, since in 1998, she and some, usually her partner, who was he was in academic, he was vice chancellor of one of the universities, but he used to come and sit on the floor with everybody else, and yeah, so they were with me, right? There was quite a few who've been with me for a long time, and as I describe it, it's like an open system. So it would continue. It was like a body that continued to be, and sometimes it would change. There were some who were consistent, but there was often a change in that open. It was an open community,
right?
But there were people, and certainly the ones that I interviewed for the PhD were people who had been coming for quite a period of time.
Right. And so then is the PhD, I think you say in the introduction that the PhD is the inspiration for this book.
Yes, it is.
So what do you think? So what may be the difference or the...
Well, after I did the PhD, I thought, oh, well, this is it, and then I tried to, kind of sell it to publishers,
Yeah.
Make it into a book. But, it had the title of it was ridiculous. It says the female metaphor, Virgin Mother Crone of the dynamic cosmological unfolding, her embodiment in seasonal ritual as a catalyst for personal and cultural change. And I was delighted that, at the doctoral, when I got my doctorate, they had to read all that out. And it took up a lot of space in the program. I was very happy about taking up all that space. But, when you want to publish a book, you cannot. You have to, So I had to try and work out what is the title of this, what. And I hadn't. Anyway, it was a synergistic conversation that you describe in the new book, particularly, that my partner and I had when Starhawk was visiting Australia. And I was saying, because she was a major inspiration. I said,
yes.
I identify my spirituality as Gaian, really Gaian. But, it has pagan roots. It's really pagan. And he says, oh, what about Pagayan? I said, that's it. The lights went on. That's it. And I said, and it's a cosmology. It's yeah. And so we immediately put it into Google, Pagayan, and we sort of, I mean, we were the only ones that had the name, but as soon as I had the name,
yeah,
then the thesis could transform. And I rewrote, bits, just edited the PhD into
right.
book.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly fine. And so for people, for example, who haven't yet read the book or are planning to buy it, how would you, let's say, define Pagayan cosmology? And I know it has Gaia in it and pagan in it. And how would you explain that to anybody?
Yeah, well, it's Gaian because it's earth-based,
Mm-hmm.
and it's combines science, going on the Gaian theory, James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis, and the evolutionary understanding of how we got here,
Yes.
So the evolutionary story. And Charlene Spretnak probably was one of the, she wrote in a magazine called The Woman of Power about Gaian spirituality. And I don't know what year that was, but, she called it Gaian spirituality, and she was one of the readers for my thesis in the end, because Charlene has been very important, but and I knew she knew what I was talking about, she knew the combination of what Gaian spirituality was, and it was part of the evolutionary. It incorporates the evolutionary understanding of how we got here. And then Starhawk, I was totally dependent on Starhawk's work when I was no longer in the Christian paradigm. Mary Daly was the one that, blew me out of the water of the Christian thing.
Wow.
Yeah,
all the people I admire as well. All the women I admire as well. Yes.
So, Mary Daly, so I was blown out of the water with the Christian thing. That's all over. It's finished. I'm out of here. But you have to have something. So Starhawk provided that, her spiral dance book and ceremonies. And turns out when I talked to Starhawk, I was in her first class that she did in San Francisco in 1980.
Oh my God.
I didn't realize that was her first class, but I was in Berkeley and I went to her class in 1980 in San Francisco. And then I invited Starhawk up to the seminary, and she talked at the seminary and I still have the notes. But anyway, so Starhawk was very important, and the pagan thing, that was where I could ground myself. But there was still too much of the God in lots of the pagan stuff, for me.
Right.
So I'm not sure what the question was there. But the pagan and the Gaian, Pagayan, and how that came together for me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer you.
That's okay. No, that's fine. And because I was just thinking, as you were saying that, you mentioned a lot about Gaia also as well. And so it actually makes me think of that, and of that concept of like Parthenogenesis and that kind of early, I don't know if it's feminine birthing or birthing without the male consort or the male god.
Yes, well, it's right there. Parthenogenesis is right there in the evolutionary story.
Mm-hmm.
The first cell divided by itself.
That's right. That's right.
So it's right there. It's called mitosis, right? Isn't that mitosis?
Right. That's right.
And so it's happening for, creativity of the cosmos is happening for a long time before there's a meiosis.
Yep.
Before the gender thing, the sex stuff happened. I think it's at 1.5 billion years ago, something like that. I'd have to check. But anyway, so parthenogenesis is right there.
Mm-hmm.
It happens. It has happened, and it happens still.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think for certain it bled into even as far as like pre-archaic Greece, because I think like people like Hera and all the Greek goddesses, there is that argument that they were parthenogenetic goddesses before, the male consorts.
Yeah, well, Marguerite Riggioglioso.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, I was in communications with her when she was doing her PhD.
Oh.
So I had her PhD before she got it published, you know. So I was communicating with her because I was writing this article on Gaia for Patricia Monahan. So yeah, what Marguerite writes very well about the early, you know, Hera, Artemis, you know, a lot of the goddesses and the priestesses, and introduces the possibility, which is, you know, hard for our minds that have been so colonized to get around the fact that the possibility that the earliest priestesses, at least I was focusing on Gaia, the earliest priestesses at Delphi, practiced parthenogenesis.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a hard one to wrap your mind around. Yes.
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 That they knew enough about their bodies. You know, I mean, I had a friend who knew enough about her body that she never used tampons, or so when she went out with her period, she would just stop it.
Oh my God.
She could control her bleeding.
Wow.
When. So I thought, and the work of Carla, who wrote Don't Take It Lying Down. She did her whole PhD on contraception with, you know, mind, body.
Wow.
It's Carly is very familiar. I've got her book. Yeah, Don't Take It Lying Down.
Wow.
And she did her PhD on that. So from those small experiences, I know that there's more possible than, you know.
Yeah, I wonder.
And the story of how Delphi declined.
Yes, I was just going to say that. I wonder if that's tied into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It became a male-dominated space, you know, with Apollo and blah, blah,
and used politically, and so that at some point, you know, they could say disparaging things about the priestesses, because in some ways they were true. They were uneducated. They just had declined. The whole thing had fallen apart.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's fascinating. I agree. I've come across so many, and Margaret Riglioso.
Yes, something like that.
I use
sorry, Margaret.
Yeah, sorry. I used both of her books when I was doing my PhD because they were so the Divine Birth one, and then the other one.
Yes.
I can't remember what the other one is called.
It's Mother Goddesses or Antiquity.
Yes, both of those. And they were, you know, foundational to my work. But they were the first time that I really read these details about the bees, and how the bees, of course, were thought to be parthenogenetic animals or whatever. And how that was connected to Delphi, and how they made it. Was the first time that I read about I can't remember exactly because it's been a while, but that they made some kind of a bee fermentation, and the priestess would allow that to come into her body.
All right. Yes. Yeah. Well, they had to sit on a tripod.
Right.
I mean, that's the radical thing, you see. They had to sit on a tripod, so the vapors coming up from the earth came. They were, well, even without the fermentation thing, the vapors themselves were hallucinating. Well, they gave you an altered state.
Yes.
They were entrancing, right? And so, yes, the tripod, you know, with their legs apart. I mean, you can see why when the Christian guys come along, they're horrified.
Yes. Yes. What are they doing there? Yes. Yeah, no, that's a great, I also did an episode on my podcast about how Apollo is said to have slain the python, you know, the snake, and sort of that snake mythology too around Delphi. How do you feel about snake cosmology and the snake in sort of in Pagayan cosmology?
Yeah, well, you know, the snake is very important in our Samhain celebrations in particular. I even make gingerbread snakes.
Oh, wow.
We make gingerbread snakes, so that it's part of the ceremony and the devouring of the gingerbread snake. in 3 parts, and that is inspired by Robin Morgan's poem, The Network of the Imaginary Mother, from her book, Lady of the Beasts.
No, I haven't. I'm not aware of this book or poem.
Here we go. It's a well-worn copy, Lady of the Beasts by Robin Morgan, and I've had it for a long time. I mean, that was one of the earliest poems, was The Network of the Imaginary Mother, and it's up on my website with Robin actually reading it.
Oh, wow, okay. So you can send me that link and I'll add it in our description below. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to send you the link. But that poem was very important to me for all kinds of reasons over the time. But the bit where she talks about the carapace is split, the skin, the shed skin lies upon the ground, and I must devour the exoskeleton of my old shapes, wasting no part, free only then to radiate whatever I conceive. So she uses the metaphor of the snake there, and so I incorporate that very much into Samhain celebrations.
Wow.
And understanding the snake, and why it was valued so much in goddess cosmology in terms of its power, for all kinds of reasons, probably even certainly beyond my ken, but the shedding of the skin,
yes,
and its capacity for transformation and renewal. Mm-hmm. And Joseph Campbell writes about that, as well, that.
Yes.
So, it's common knowledge amongst anyone who understands mythology.
Yes. One of the saddest thing, I think, sometimes I'll teach like Adam and Eve and stuff like that in some of the religious courses I teach. And one of the first things I say is like, who's afraid of snakes, And the majority of the time women put their hands up. And I start that off with like, this is the kind of thing that breaks my heart, because it's been 2,000 years in which they have succeeded in splitting women from a very powerful symbol of power, and it's a bit heartbreaking. And I don't know how long it's going to take us to return to that relationship.
Well, one of the things I do say, and I don't know what page number it is, but somewhere about Medusa, and it's quoted around the place about, to understand that image of Medusa as the face of divine wisdom.
Yeah. The
kind of change, that's the kind of mind change that it would take, because most people, when they see Medusa, is kind of like, oh, scary, like horror, because that's what we're brought up with. But if one can, the kind of shift that's required is to be able to look upon that face as a face of divine wisdom, is a kind of shift that's required for the future, for now.
Yes.
I
love that. Yes. I've never thought of her, I think of her as powerful and a source of knowledge, because I always find that the snakes on her head are very symbolic, right? Of that sort of,
Yes.
But divine, the face of divine wisdom, that's really beautiful, Glenys. Yeah.
So, but it is, that is the kind of mind shift that's required. So I can understand why you're, because if you're in an environment where that's what you hear all the time, it's like, oh, horror.
Yes.
And, I mean, plenty of my relatives around here would, and they oh, what's Glenys doing now? Don't want to go to her place.
Yes. Well, every time I tell my friends that I hang around with witches, they get a little bit weird. Or last night I told my students that I will be spending the weekend with witches, and they kind of looked at me and were like, so is there dark magic happening? Are you afraid? And it's, like I have to really breathe through that in a way, because I'm so sad for them, because they're 20, they're young and they've already been so brainwashed. Right. And it's like, and so then but it starts a conversation, I think. And this is why I think this is so important, in your book and other things, because it starts a conversation about other ways of celebrating, right? Ancient ways of celebrating.
Yes. Well, you see, when my life fell apart, and apparently that's required. It is required that
I'm
your life.
hearing this. I'm hearing this. I'm hearing this.
You got to start again, girl. You got to start again, girl. So, yeah, down you go. And okay. So, but then trying to find out, well, what can I trust? You know, all the perennial wisdoms that we have been so infected by patriarchy, and what can I trust, and what does it come down to? And for me, it came down to the earth, moon, and sun.
Mm.
That's real, because that's what is happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The creativity of the cosmos seems to be all that matters. Creativity seems to be all that matters.
Yes.
And so that's where, and so that's where I go, well, that's what I've got to do. I've just got to live in that time space.
Right. Right. And
It's,
so,
it,
yeah, sorry. And so how do you feel about then? Do you feel like, do we feel like we need a return? Or do you feel like we're on the way to a return?
yeah, well, as many say, that the sap is rising. When Mary Condren said the sap is rising, well, they've just got their first public holiday for Bridget, for heaven's sakes.
Really?
Yeah, Ireland. The last on Monday, the 6th of February was the
Yeah.
public holiday, and it's the first public holiday for Bridget. Whoever, and they talk about, so there's great conversations happening in Ireland, and huge differences of opinion, goddess, saint, human being, who she was and who she is.
I see.
So the sap is rising.
Yeah.
He says, as Mary Condren said, even if it's even front page of the Irish Times. So she's definitely arriving and arising. And even for myself, you see, I mean, when I first started this whenever it was, ancient history, back in the 80s or whatever, I mean, a voice in the wilderness, and scratching the surface. And, I mean, I had to go a long way away to Berkeley from Australia to do what I wanted to do, because I knew it was happening over there. But now, I mean, wow, it's everywhere. And books that used to be, that I read and that were important, they're being read again by young women, the Great Cosmic Mother, they're suddenly thinking, oh, isn't this a good book? And,
Yeah.
So, and for even my own work, it's finding a new audience, when I've edited, the different bits of Pagayan cosmology and published them as articles on Return to Margot, because I contribute there. There's a new audience, young people who want to know.
Yes.
And all kinds of people who want to know now. Say, oh, right. So yes, it's definitely,
yes,
fermenting and happening.
Which I think is fantastic. It feels like momentum. It does feel like momentum, and even for myself so for example, Merlin Stone and even Charlene Spretnak, even though that was a little better, but I can't remember who wrote The Creation of Gerda.
Yeah, Gerda Lerner.
Gerda Lerner, thank you.
Yes.
So these names, these writings were on my list for my PhD, and I finished my PhD in 2016, but it took me about 6 years. And so let's say 2010, when I put them on the list, some of my committee were like, no, these are not, these are not books we want to use. They're dated. They're all about goddess worship. I got a lot of pushback from the women on my committee.
Yes.
I mean, the men on my committee either didn't know or didn't really care. They were like, yeah, okay, this looks good. But the women were very aware of sort of, I guess they were really afraid of this sort of goddess worshiping, right? And so I read them anyways, but I had a very hard time trying to get them into my PhD.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now this is why I do the goddess reads on Facebook, because I have them and I just want to share them and talk about them with people. And I really haven't had that chance to do that in the academic world.
Yes, yes.
And it's true. You're like, so before I published the book, if you asked me, I would say, oh, there's not that many goddess worshippers left. Imagine.
There's more and more of them happening.
Imagine my ignorance. Right? Oh no, that was like a 90s thing. It's not happening anymore.
Yes, yeah.
And then I published the book and all these people just came out of the woodwork. And I thought, wow, like, are we ever in the ivory tower? Right?
Right.
Like, are we ever? And so I'm really glad. I'm really glad that you see that too, that you see the. So I was going to ask you a weird question, which is sort of because you live in Australia, which I love and I hope to visit. But how does it affect? I know the wheel kind of goes differently in Australia. How, like, do you think that affects the energies or anything differently? Like when half the world is doing it this way and half, like, how do you feel like that affects you? The energy, I guess, of the practice.
Yeah, well, it's definitely an important factor for me, in the earliest days. Because, everyone would be always talking about winter when it was, and,
That's right.
I go where even around me still, at summer solstice, people are doing Christmas.
Yes.
And there's all these reindeers and snow and Santa's and it's blazing hot, and it's not a time for lighting candles, but there's still all of that metaphor around me in the shops and every mainstream, people doing it all the time.
Yes.
And so it wasn't until I went and experienced winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere, which I did, and its relationship to Christmas. And when I got back from the Northern Hemisphere, came back to Australia, I knew I could never do Christmas again.
Wow.
That was in 1988 or 1986 or something like that. So that was sort of like the definite thing that I had to do summer solstice at summer solstice. I had to do winter solstice at winter solstice, and just can the whole. So I was able to do it because my children were sort of growing up. I understand how difficult it is for people with young children not to do Christmas.
Right.
But I have seen it. It is possible to transform it into summer solstice and still give each other's gifts, because you can do it. Can make the. And there are creative pagans here in the Southern Hemisphere who do that. So yes, it was definitely an important part of doing the Celtic calendar, the 8 seasonal, my indigenous heritage, your old European heritage. I'm 68% Scot, apparently. Translating that into my place, doing the seasons in my place and creating the wheel. And it actually goes the other way. Sunwise, sunwise is around a different way, because the sun is moving across the sky to the northerly.
That's right.
So sunwise is different as well. So it's an important part of Pagayan cosmology was the creating of that wheel, my indigenous heritage, in this context. Now, this land that I am on is Aboriginal land. It's Waka Waka people is my homeland. And there are creative people here in the Southern pagans who are incorporating more of that. But I think that could be understood also as appropriating. But so there's a balance between acknowledging the place that I'm on, the land we're on, and understanding the different metaphor that will arise out of this place. There's different flora and fauna.
Yes.
So that can be, but it can be incorporated into the indigenous. And there is evidence that the indigenous peoples of this land in different places actually had wheels, had stone. There are stone circles. Excellent. They found stone circles in the southeast. So there's a lot more went on here than the white Europeans ever cottoned on to, and are
Right.
only beginning to scratch the surface of as the Indigenous people now get to speak again about what they remember,
Yes.
what hasn't been stamped out.
Yes.
And they, the Indigenous people of this land, have in different regions, that some of them only have 5 seasons, some of them have 12 seasons, some of them do have 8 seasons. So there are different wheels,
Hmm.
and there's a group who actually have recently made a wheel. Oh well, they made lots of wheels for different regions, and I was very impressed. But they go in the northern hemisphere direction.
Oh,
So I think, oh, yeah, but I mean, the elders who gave the information, it's
yes.
being translated into Western frame, and the Western frame is Northern Hemispheric, and so where they just gone, I said, that scrambles my brain. It really needs to go this way. But
Right.
anyway, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because I saw your pictures. I always see your pictures when you're doing your celebrations, and especially around Christmas or the opposite, in the summer solstice. And I see your photos, and I always ask myself, like, how do you do it, and how does it affect you, uh because yeah, you're on an opposite or a mirror
a
side.
mirror. It is very much, and that's the thing about a Southern Hemispheric mind. If the Southern Hemispheric mind really does, the seasonal moments when you do get, because you're all the time being confronted with the Northern Hemispheric thing,
I
so you know
imagine.
what's going on there. And it is a mirror. They're coincidental. The word coincidental, they actually are coincidental. And you can't have one without the other.
Huh.
It's not possible. It's
True.
not possible. We live on a planet that's 3-dimensional, round,
That's
and
right.
it's not possible to have one without the other. And so
Yes.
they do feed each other, like Imbolc and Llamas feed each other, and winter solstice and summer solstice feed each other. I mean, winter solstice, the new form comes into being, and but what is the purpose of that form at summer solstice? It's to return. Oh no, we don't like that. Let's celebrate winter solstice. Yeah, we can do that, but I'm not sure about summer solstice. Summer solstice is like full of light, and that's fine and cheery and happy. But what happens when fullness of light is it turns into the dark. The
Yes.
purpose of the new being born at winter solstice is to fulfill itself and return, so
Yes.
that the new can come forth again.
Yes. Well, that's
Never ending. It's never ending renewal.
I had not thought about that mirror. That is really lovely. I had not thought about that mirror image, but I think you're absolutely right. And the fact that yeah, you can't have one without the other. Yes. That's
Yeah,
really
and
that's
and, and some of my students now. I just had a meeting with 4 of them who are in the United States recently, this week, and one of the things that they get from doing Pagayan cosmology is that they're conscious of it happening, the opposite happening at the
right.
same time, and it's a global perspective that they get. I mean, they're still do their thing in their place the way they want to do it, but there's more consciousness that they live on a globe, where
Yes.
something else is happening, and they're conscious that I'm doing something different.
Yes. Yes.
The opposite. It's not just different, it's the opposite. And it's like, oh, how does that, that affects this
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I thought when I saw some of your stuff. But so it triggers this idea that actually it's an interesting thing because it reminds you that there's another half of the world.
Yeah. Well, you see, when Vicky Noble, yes, I'm just going to close my blinds here.
Yeah.
Um, when Vicky Noble and Starhawk as well came to Australia, and they had to get their brains around the different. Starhawk left it up to us. She said, "Oh, you call the directions."
Right. Right.
And I used to be on Vicky's list, and she'd send out stuff, all totally addressing the Northern Hemisphere, and I'd always get cranky. Are you addressing a global audience? Anyway, but it's changed now. I mean, Vicky is totally with it.
Right.
I know that something's happening different, and they'll put it in the things in their email list. But in the early days, the Northern Hemispheric people were totally like, "This is the world.
Yes.
This is what's happening."
Yes.
And then
Yes.
this squeaky little. They call me. I grew up with the feeling that I was Glenys the Menace.
Love that.
And people have called me Goddess Persister.
Oh,
So, the little squeaky wheels, like, excuse me. Something.
that's amazing.
Southern Hemisphere.
Yes, and I imagine that also gives you a very unique perspective in writing the book as well, and in thinking about the cosmos, right?
Yes.
Because you really get to be aware of both on a regular basis. It's a reality for you on a daily basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, people think that it's, Easter coming up. And there's always bunnies and chickens and eggs and things in the shops.
Yes.
And I used to get cranky, but I think I understand it's because of us Europeans are only here recently. We've only been here a couple of 100 years, and that's why it's.
Yes, I agree 100%. And so what kind of work do you do then now? Like, what do you do with the spirit, not the spirit world? That sounds a little bit weird, but yeah. What are some of the things that you enjoy doing?
Well, I mean, every day, I have my rituals, morning rituals, in terms of, that incorporate, exercise of various kinds of it. And it's always incorporating, where I am in the great big cosmos, the incredible blackness that we're immersed in.
Yes.
Acknowledgement of that, and then, the earth that I'm on, and the awesomeness of what's beneath me. Can't get my brain around that. I can't get my brain around that. But, an acknowledgement of that, and different exercises that I need to do for me, my body, but always finishing with what I call the triple goddess breath meditation every day, some form of it, which I developed, and it's sort of an understanding of the three qualities and incorporating that into the yoga mudras. So that's part of my everyday practice. And then there's the seasonal things that come up every 6 or 8 weeks, whatever it is, 6 weeks, 8 of them a year.
Yeah.
And I still I still do that to some much more modified than what it used to be. It used to be, 3 weeks of preparation and moon court, and I was younger, the old grey mare, she ain't what she used to be. So I don't have the energy to do what I used to do.
Right.
But it still happens. The earth doesn't stop turning, so it happens, and I do it partly for the online presence. The decorations, the way I do a particular space, and I do it properly. And it's because even though I don't have the actual physical presences of people, the online community is huge.
Huge. Yes.
And it does feed those people.
Yes.
It feeds. I have some goddess runes, and one that I drew recently was that it said, you'll be invited to nourish those starved for the body and blood of wisdom, from the abundant life that nourishes you.
Oh, wow.
It was written by a woman back in the 80s, a friend of mine. Wow. She was at these goddess rooms. But yes, so I'm conscious that what I do now, seasonal, as I celebrate them now, feeds a larger community.
Yes.
That's still very much present in it, just a different way. It's a different.
Yes. And I, even for myself as a beginner, the one way that I connect so far, I've only really invested in the solstices, but I'm hoping to do others. But the one way that I've connected has been online, so like the circle of sisters, we're meeting online because really that's the most practical. I mean, some of them, Canada's big, some of them are on the other side of Canada and BC, some of them are all in the States, some of them are in Europe.
Yeah.
So I agree, like there is power in that online presence. At first, I wasn't sure, I was like, I don't know, is it going to be the same? But we did a meditation for the winter solstice that was so powerful, Glenys, that I was on my own. We had all muted and someone was guiding us through the meditation, but I like burst into tears over, like the meditation was so powerful. But then I like scared myself. I was like, what is the emotional release that's happening here, But it was all online, but when you're quiet in a room, really, it's real. It's a real, vibration.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Well, it must be all within us. It is there.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a connection that I think we perhaps underestimated because we thought that we would have to always be within a circle, like physically.
Right.
And now I wonder if we've realized maybe how much more powerful that circle expands from all of us.
It's been very different for me adjusting to, doing the ceremonies in person. And I do encourage people when you can, to experience the ceremonial circle with real people if you can.
Yeah.
So it continued, but I was so used to that presence, being able to facilitate the poetry and the ceremony in that physical space. So there was a big adjustment for me. There has been a big and still ongoing really of the limit, the difference of how to do it, how to do this online.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of
Yeah.
skill.
I do agree with that as well. Like, so when I think I was part of one circle, a couple of circles this year, and when you're present, it is very powerful as well. Like, it's just different. It's just different. Yes, I agree with you.
As a facilitator of the process, and probably for the participants, you can, there's more body communication in terms of, being able to sense the energies around it. So speaking, as a facilitator, and I write about that, being the facilitator, priestess, evocateur, is speaking to each participant and the energy between, it's not as easy online to do that.
Yes.
So the people who attend online are much more, they have to be much more, have self-initiation,
True.
being able to do more for themselves.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's a key importance. Yes. Because I'm thinking the facilitator had no idea of my emotional outburst.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Right. Or where had we been in a circle, that would have been very clear.
Yes.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I don't even think I told her after because I felt really like, I don't know, I just felt weird about it. Right. I was like,
Yeah, in the ceremonial circle where, things like that would happen, there's still a respect for the person, not trying to fix them. The ceremonial space is where the person is allowed to be with what they are.
Right.
And that's a skill too, allowing each person to, be with whatever it is they're with. So there still wouldn't have been any interruption of your process,
True.
Let it be. But yes, you might have felt at least witnessed, or somehow it was okay.
Yes.
But instead, because it's online, you have to be able to handle it, yourself and work with it. Yes.
Yes. And that's kind of what I had to do, and like reflect on it and think about it and then sort of pick myself up and go, So I think that those are some really interesting points. And I think they're going to become more and more relevant as we move forward, because we got to find that medium between being together and also being online.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So my last question, I guess, is what do you see for yourself next? What's new? What's next? What are you thinking of doing with your research, your time? your work?
Oh, yes. Well, because I've slowed down, which happens,
Yeah.
you know, I'm quite busy really with the time that I have, with the capacities that I have.
Mhm.
Um, but certainly the new book, which is backwards here,
Yes.
the,
Yes.
the new book, eh, which is a documentation. You see, it's all very well. This one is all very well, but it was published in 2005, and a lot happened after that. We actually did the ceremonies for a long time after that moon court got built. So this is the documentation of, really the poetry, the what happened.
Oh, wow.
Um, and it looks like it's actually taking off, and it's like I'm kind of surprised. It's kind of like, oh my goodness, this is bigger than me. It's much bigger than me, you know.
Yeah.
So that it is unfolding into interviews and talking and
Yes.
more teaching, and I think storytelling. In a sense, I've set up my space a little bit with, because Trista Hendren from Girl God Books, who's a wonderful woman, had me read my contribution to her Solstice Carols book, which was on winter solstice, and I read it and with a video, and
Yes.
to her, and she, I thought, oh, that's kind of part of the new thing that
Yes.
I might do a bit more of. It was actually just reading and a video and sure, but as you say, got to make it in digestible bits. This one was 14 minutes long, which is all right, but probably needs to be a bit shorter. But that kind of thing, storytelling, and certainly this new book like is unfolding
Yes.
in ways that is like awesome to me. And one of the questions I ask at Lamas before we dance is, can the grub imagine the butterfly she will become? Can we imagine what will emerge?
Oh,
And I feel like when I think of myself, 50 years ago, can the grub imagine the butterfly she will become? I couldn't. It's like the difference in the beings from, 50 years ago to now, you think, oh, well, yes, can the grub imagine the butterfly she will become?
wow.
So anyway, there's lots. And so when we say in the ceremonies, I say we, because we did for decades, the celebrant would, we'd all have our snakes out, and I'd say, you are more, much more. And I used to think, oh no, more.
How much more?
Yeah, yes, but there is always more.
I love that. Oh, I think that's wonderful. And I agree, Glenys. I don't think that you maybe realize how inspirational your work is. Uh and like, yeah, I would say that it's really something that I would say is sort of found it. Like, I refer to this all the time. And pass it on to my own students. And one of the things that I always say is like how good the research is. As an academic, you value that. I read a lot
Yes.
of pieces that are good, but when I read this, I was like, this is good research, And so, yeah, I think you're
Yeah, well,
wonderful.
it was always important to me that it was acceptable to academics
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So, it had to be done that way with indexes and footnotes. And perhaps
Yeah,
some people, oh, all those footnotes, but they don't have to read them.
it's true. It's true. That was a tough one for me too. That's a tough one, I think, for a lot of us that are trying to straddle that. I want to give you who this goddess is, but I also want to give you some primary source, and I also want to give you other authors and some research. That's always a bit of a tough one. But it's
And I
valid.
was always, yeah, and I was always keen, like I just couldn't help myself acknowledging where I got things from.
Yeah.
Sometimes there'll be small things, but I just wanted to say that I got it from this person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you for joining me. And I think we can bring everyone to an end here, although stick around after I stop recording.
All right, okay.
Don't go away. But thank you for joining me. And I will put all the information and all your information and your website and your social media, all of it in the description below so that people can click on everything and look around. And I'll also share this with you so that you can share it however you like. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you.